While the entire country was focused on the evil practices of the insurance companies, I think there's another industry that is doing just as much to hurt Americans without getting much attention. I'm, of course, talking about the pharmacy business managers, or PBMs. Now, to be honest, I'd be surprised if any of you have heard of this diabolical industry because the media really doesn't like talking about them.
You know what came out of that meeting is that we're paying far too much because we're paying much more than other countries. And we have laws that make it impossible to reduce. And we have a thing called the middleman. You know the middleman, right? The horrible middleman that makes more money, frankly, than the drug companies, and they don't do anything except they're a middleman. We're going to knock out the middleman. I'm going to be very unpopular after that statement.
In the most basic sense, these PBMs are just middlemen working between the pharmacies, the pharmaceutical manufacturers, and the insurance companies. Their job on the surface is to get the best rates for the medication and help out the patients. However, this is where these companies turn evil, because instead of helping out the patients, they've been filling their own pockets.
If their drugs placed on the formulary, manufacturers provide rebates to PBMs, some of which are passed on to consumers. But they keep some for themselves. And because PBMs retain a share of that rebate, they have an incentive to keep those list price high. And who bears the brunt of that? Consumers, particularly if their cost sharing is based on a percentage of the list price.
Basically, these large PBMs make billions of dollars while hurting programs like Medicaid and making lives harder for people who need certain life-saving drugs every month. Now, I know many of you hate the very idea of taking drugs like Ozempic, and trust me, I would rather follow RFK Jr.'s plan than take any such medication.
Since 74% of Americans are obese, the cost of all of them, if they take their Ozempic prescriptions, will be $3 trillion a year. For half the price of Ozempic, we could purchase regeneratively raised organic agriculture, organic food for every American, 3 meals a day, and gym membership for every obese American.
However, the simple reality is that 60% of Americans take at least some kind of prescription drug, and a staggering 25% are taking 4 or more medications regularly. That's hundreds of millions of people who are getting fleeced just because these middlemen only care about their own profit margins. The FTC even filed a lawsuit against them for sending patients to more expensive insulin sources for years and years.
The federal government is suing some big drug middlemen companies over a system of drug rebates that regulators say has made the price of insulin soar for diabetic patients.
Their rebate scheme drove prices up for insulin, so much so that over the last few decades, the price of insulin has risen over 1,200%.
I mean, there's a reason why the list prices of insulin in the US are often 5 to 10 times higher than in any other country. If that statistic doesn't make you mad, I don't know what else will.
And yet, at the end of the day, 1.3 million Americans are rationing their insulin. People have died. People end up in the hospital. And you're all working night and day to lower the cost. And all over the world, people are paying a fraction of the price, not only for insulin, but for other products, drugs.
Now, the crazy thing is that the top 3 PBMs basically own this industry thanks to their 80% market share.
They own or are owned by insurers, they have pharmacies, and they also increasingly have physician practices. And they use their leverage to enrich themselves, often to the detriment of the patients that they're intended to be serving.
And wouldn't you know that once you dig deep into these PBMs and their parent companies, Vanguard and BlackRock start appearing again and again. Now, this is the most obvious example of a monopoly, and I'm glad a bipartisan movement is calling them out. However, the people running these companies might just be the most shameful people I've ever seen because they don't even want to admit that there's a problem with this system.
And the user thinks there's a problem. The pharmacist thinks there's a problem. I'm wondering if you think there's a problem.
I absolutely believe that there's an opportunity to solve.
So is that a yes?
True cost.
Is that a yes?
So the answer
okay,
is,
never mind. How about you, Dr. Kutzner? Do you think there's a problem that we have an opportunity to fix?
Congresswoman, healthcare is hard. So agree that there are challenges and continued issues that we can all do better on, and we certainly can be part of that solution.
Okay, I'm going to ask it one more time before my patients get. Do you think there's a problem?
Congresswoman, there are always challenges within healthcare,
Okay.
and so we
I'll
always
reclaim my time. Dr. Conway.
Yes, as a practicing physician, medicines need to be affordable.
Hallelujah.
Now, these PBMs are already screwing us over by getting more money from us than what they pay to the pharmaceutical companies. However, they're also hurting people in other ways. For instance, thanks to their absolute monopoly, they force patients to choose mail-order pharmacies instead of the physical ones.
That not only do PBMs reimburse their affiliate pharmacies at significantly higher cost than affiliated, but it also shows that PBMs use a number of tools to steer patients to their affiliated pharmacies, even when the cost is higher to the patient. And when discussing that matter, documents also show that they're more concerned about the optics of a patient paying thousands of dollars more than the actual patient paying thousands of dollars more. When you have independent pharmacists coming into our office in Congress repeatedly, and they say they're forced into using PBMs.
And because of this, sometimes people end up receiving expired or even wrong medications.
After her family was forced by insurance to switch to a mail-order pharmacy. Her son's medication was poorly packaged and damaged in the heat. The dose sent him into liver rejection.
And they want you to choose these mail-order pharmacies because they have better control over them and they can cut out your corner store pharmacist. That's why in the last few years, owners of these independent pharmacies have been protesting against these PBMs all over the country.
More than 100 pharmacies in Kansas will close on Wednesday to protest against pharmacy benefit managers who they claim negatively impact health care.
Many pharmacists across the state are planning what they call a walkout soon. They're putting up a united front against pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs.
Now, luckily, some states are already making sure greedy companies don't overcharge the people or the government.
For far too long, drug middlemen called PBMs have taken advantage of customers and raised drug prices. Under my leadership, Arkansas took action and imposed nearly $1.5 million in fines against law-breaking PBMs last year. Now we're going even further and banning PBM conflicts of interest altogether. This will prevent inflated drug prices, protect pharmaceutical access across our state, and help Arkansans be healthier for less money. Some of these big businesses are worried because Arkansas is leading the way, and they don't want other states to follow our lead. But we're not afraid to be a conservative leader for America, and I will never be afraid to stand up for our seniors, our veterans, and everyone else who relies on their local pharmacy to stay healthy.
In fact, just last week, the National Association of Attorneys General, on behalf of a bipartisan coalition of 39 state and territory attorneys general, sent a letter to congressional leaders urging them to pass an act prohibiting pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs, from owning or operating pharmacies. And this kind of action should be swift, since even people on the Trump team have promised to get these PBMs under control.
And our kids are getting sicker and sicker. They're not getting better. Nobody here, all the people here who are defending this current system and defending these pharmaceutical industry profits, many of whom are taking huge amounts of money from the pharmaceutical industry, millions of dollars for many of these senators. And none of that, this is not making our country healthier. It's making us sicker. We need to get rid of these conflicts.
However, it's not going to be easy. These pharmacy business managers are an important part of the whole medical mafia.
Why is it that insurance companies, why should health insurance companies be able to buy up the PBMs and also buy up the pharmacies so that the PBM, as I understand it, is supposed to negotiate with the insurer and with the pharmaceutical companies in order to get better prices. But if the insurance company owns the PBM and they own the pharmacies, and in some cases they own the doctor's practices, I mean, who's really benefiting?
They are also pumping hundreds of millions of dollars into political campaigns and into media companies. And we already know how this entire system also gets help from the shady food industry, which makes us sick and pushes people towards these butchers who rob us in the name of treatment.
About 70% of American children's diet is ultra-processed. That means industrial manufactured in a factory. These foods consist primarily of processed sugar, ultra-processed grains, and seed oils. Laboratory scientists who many of whom formerly worked for the cigarette industry, which purchased all the big food companies in the 1970s and 80s, deployed thousands of scientists to figure out new chemicals to make the food more addictive. And these ingredients didn't exist 100 years ago. Humans aren't biologically adapted to eat them. Hundreds of these chemicals are now banned in Europe, but ubiquitous in American processed foods.
And all the while, they're making so much money that out of the top 10 industries in the US by revenue, 5 fall under the healthcare umbrella. This is probably the only reason why people like RFK Jr. enjoy support among both the liberal and the conservative voters of this country. They talk about the problems average working class Americans face every day. And this kind of corruption is also exactly why I've supported the idea of investigating Medicaid financial records.
According to an investigative report, PBM skimmed off $1.3 billion of the $4.25 billion that Medicaid insurers spent on drugs in 2017.
That program was meant to help the most vulnerable citizens of this country, and yet these PBMs are making record profits by charging Medicaid way more than they end up paying to the pharmacists. In fact, this practice is so common that there's even a name for it. It's called spread pricing.
The second way PBMs are affecting drug prices is something called spread pricing. Spread pricing occurs when a PBM charges an insurer a higher price for the drug than the amount it is reimbursed by the pharmacy, with the PBMs keeping the difference. 15 PBMs charged Indiana's Medicaid program $204 for a drug and reimbursed the pharmacies only $197, with the PBMs pocketing the $7. 3 years later, in 2017, PBMs charged the Medicaid program $147, but reimbursed the pharmacy $17, with PBMs pocketing $130. That's right, PBMs' profit increased by $123 for a single 30-day supply of a heartburn medication, all at the expense of the American consumer.
And despite hurting hundreds of millions of people, somehow these evil corporations have managed to stay out of the spotlight. So the purpose of this video was simple. I want you to know exactly who is forcing you to pay extra for your prescriptions and how you can quite literally reach out to your congressman and force them after these companies. Thanks to the unexpected bipartisan hatred for this practice, I think for the first time we're in a position to stop these greedy companies, and that's why it would be great if you could share this video with as many people as possible. Don't forget to share your thoughts with everyone in the comments down below as well. I appreciate your support by watching these videos, giving it a thumbs up, and subscribing to the channel if you want to see more.